Hello everyone, and a warm welcome to those tuning in live on YouTube and LinkedIn. I am Daniel Deraban, and I'm a Senior Director of Product Management here at Bitdefender. And today we are going to unveil a brand new technology, a unique technology that everybody has been expecting. Whether you're joining us from North America, Europe, Asia, or anywhere else in the world, thank you for being part of this landmark event. Today marks a major milestone. We are here because something needs to change. We live in a time where cyber attacks are faster, more targeted, and more damaging than ever before. Threat actors aren't just exploiting vulnerabilities. They're abusing trust, using native tools, and blending into everyday activity. And that means that traditional defense just isn't enough anymore. The reality is security teams are overwhelmed. Attack surfaces keep growing. The pressure is constantly rising. We are here today to share something we believe can shift the balance. Not another layer of alerts, not another dashboard, but a completely new approach. One that is proactive, adaptive, and designed for how attackers operate today, not 5 years ago. So, what can you expect from today's event? First, you'll hear from our General Manager, Andrei Florescu, on how this innovation came to life and why it matters now more than ever. Then, we'll go inside the world of real attacks with our Red Team live from Singapore. Paul and Nico will show you how attackers are operating. We will then continue from San Antonio, Texas, with Tyler and Martin as they explain why detection is so hard and where those gaps actually lie. We'll then bring it all together in a dynamic panel to introduce the new technology with myself, with Dragos, with Christy, and then we will follow up with a short demo and Q&A. So don't hesitate to leave your questions in the chat at any time during the event, and I will answer as many as possible during this part. And then we will wrap with key takeaways and closing thoughts from Andrei. We've designed this to be fast-paced, engaging, and above all, relevant to the challenges you are facing every day. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce Andrei Florescu, our President and General Manager. Hi, Andrei.
Hi, Daniel. Big thank you to everyone joining in today. It will be fun.
We are all eager to hear about the journey and strategy behind what we are unveiling today. Over to you, Andrei.
Thank you, Daniel. Today is not just about launching a new product. It's about redefining how we think about cybersecurity and how we, as an industry, approach risk. For years now, the security conversation has revolved around detection and response. And while those are critical capabilities, the threat landscape has changed dramatically. Attackers are moving faster. They're interactive. They're using automation. They're using your tools against you, operating system tooling and infrastructure management and automation tooling. And they're getting smarter at hiding in most places security tools just don't look at. There are two metrics that stood out when I looked at the most recent Bitdefender Cybersecurity Assessment Report, an industry survey that we publish yearly. The first one is 67% of responders believes there's a strong need to reduce attack surface by disabling unnecessary tooling and applications. Secondly, in the top 3 cybersecurity challenges for 25, more than a third of the responders cite difficulties in preventing misuse of legitimate tools. And so we're challenging ourselves to do better. What if we stop thinking just about detecting attackers as early as possible? What if we stop giving them room to move around in the first place? This is the simple and fundamental premise that led us to build something new, something designed not just to react to threats, but to reduce the likelihood of the threat to exist. We validated the concept over many conversations with hundreds of customers, tens of value-added partners, and MSSPs, CISOs, security strategists, industry analysts, InfoSec professionals, all of them telling us, yes, we need more control over the attack surfaces. We need it in a way that doesn't create more work or more noise. They need intelligent security that's personalized to their operating environment. They told us they didn't want more alerts. Not shocking. They want fewer things to worry about. Same things across customers, value-added partners, and MSPs. It's a never-ending story. It sticks with you. In our day-to-day activities, security hardening needs to be individualized. Security policies need to adapt to the specific risk profile of each user, each infrastructure component, each workload, each business unit. Your security controls must learn continuously, not only once a quarter, not during audits, but in real time. They need to self-adjust. We knew early on that addressing this kind of complexity couldn't be done with off-the-shelf thinking. It required fundamental rethink of how security posture and attack surfaces are being managed. It means leveraging AI not just to find what's bad, but to understand what normal looks like across the constantly evolving landscape and automatically close off paths that attackers are most likely to take with a high degree of confidence and fidelity. You don't need to build this type of technology in isolation. You can't, but side by side with customers, with partners, and with MSPs. We've worked across Europe, North America, and Asia, looking at every insight, every use case, everything that helped us shape the technology we're launching today. We built this technology to be dynamic, to make real-time decisions based on actual behavior. And we design it so that you don't need a massive team or a massive budget to benefit from it. Whether you're an enterprise or a mid-sized business, this technology is built to fit the way you work. I'm incredibly proud of what we've built, and I'm even more excited for what it enables our customers to do next. We see a future where risk is constantly assessed, constantly reduced, and continuously aligned with the business profile. We see a future where security enables innovation instead of limiting it. And with this launch, we're taking a major step towards that vision. To our partners and customers, your input has been invaluable. To everyone who contributed to this journey, thank you. To the Bitdefender teams, your work has been extraordinary. Thank you for being part of this moment. And now, let's show you what comes next. Daniel, back to you.
Thank you, Andrei, and we'll see you a bit later in the show. All right, now let's raise the curtain on what modern cyber attacks really look like. We're heading to our Singapore office, where our red team, Paul Haji, who's our Vice President of APAC, and 𝐁𝐢𝐭𝐝 who's our Principal Consultant, are standing by to take you inside the mind of an attacker. They'll walk you through various scenarios, showing just how easily attackers can blend into your environment using tools already inside your network. Let's jump into it. Paul, Nico, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Daniel.
Hi, Daniel.
I'm Paul Haji.
I'm Nico.
I'm the VP of APAC and Cybersecurity Services for Bitdefender based in Singapore. Nico, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Of course, sure. Thanks. And exciting to be here at this event. I'm Nico with the Cyber Operations Department, Principal Consultant, and our department is responsible for red teaming, penetration testing, and security advisory services.
Cool. Thanks for that, Nico. Look forward to jumping in. So on the digitization side of things, we see a lot of companies adopting new technologies, implementing them in their business. How is this from your perspective? What's going on there?
I can share my experience. I think back from 10 years ago, there was this disruption with cloud computing. Of course, we observe a lot of business value that companies get from adopting cloud. So it brings also a lot of social good. So cloud computing definitely, and a lot of other technologies bring a lot of business value, business opportunities. But of course, in my own experience, right, doing research and providing services around cloud security, we also see a lot of opportunities how to attack cloud.
And what about like other technologies like AI, quantum, all these things that keep coming up in all the articles that I'm reading?
Definitely. So AI can be, of course, a very big business enabler, and a lot of companies, not just adopting recent technology in Gen AI, right, but adoption of machine learning has been a while and brings a lot of value. And definitely now, generative AI brings huge, tremendous value. But also, of course, attackers use it. For example, deepfake, right? So we see a few big cases like banks lost big monies because the executives were spoofed using deepfake, and employees were tricked to send big amount of money. Another case, of course, like ransomware is a very big topic, very nasty topic, and we see that attackers, for example, use artificial intelligence, AI, to prioritize their targets. So as soon as they compromise environment, as soon as they are inside with ransomware, they use artificial intelligence to find more lucrative targets and prioritize it.
Yeah, I can see how they would use it for research. It'd be very easy for that.
Yeah.
And how about quantum? Like, how's that affecting technology and security?
Yeah, it's coming. So quantum is definitely a next big thing. Everyone is talking about quantum safe encryption, cryptography. But another thing, Bitdefender looked at, Bitdefender Labs, and presented last year in Vegas is how to build quantum algorithms securely. Now we can see a lot of cloud providers, cloud platforms already provide a service around quantum computing, right? And companies, especially for financial services, they use quantum to build algorithms, to build software. So definitely we have to build it with a secure mindset, right? With security from the beginning. And this is what our research shows, that it's easy to make a mistake and have a bug. So we have to, and vulnerability can be exploited, right? So we have to start building secure and safe quantum from the beginning.
Nice. And in general, like from the attacker's perspective, like those three technologies you mentioned, like how is that being exploited from the attackers?
So all these technologies basically expand attack surface, right? So definitely we live in this exciting, brave new world where digitalization can bring a lot of opportunities, right? And I believe like, yeah, it's a very exciting time. But on the other side, right, we can see a lot of problems, a lot of challenges happening, like attackers abusing it. And my belief, like we have to build it in a resilient way, and yeah, embrace this new frontier, right? This new exciting world. And of course, all these new technologies have a plenty of wealth of vulnerabilities that can be exploited by attackers, right? Or just misconfigurations. So maybe I can give you an example of our own statistics, right? Like 4 years ago, here like in Asia, we were seeing like a rapid adoption of cloud, and our report shows that every 20 seconds, there is like a new misconfiguration, which potentially can be exploited. And like Bitdefender Cybersecurity Assessment Report, which Andrei just mentioned recently, right, also shows similar observations, similar concerns. I think like more than 40% of IT leaders in the survey showed concerns about misconfigurations in cloud currently and nowadays.
Yeah, I can see how that can happen easily. There's, you know, people are moving fast and breaking things as they're developing their products, and you know, the cloud is great, but there's a lot of opportunity to make mistakes too, and sometimes those mistakes are very public and accessible on the internet, right? Which is the challenge. So misconfigurations in cloud I see as one of the bigger things that's kind of affecting. And on the AI side of things, like, have you seen like what IT departments and what security people are doing to kind of help prevent? And then again, from the attacker side, like how are they utilizing it outside of just writing phishing emails with it?
Right. IT is very concerned about AI. So again, like the same report, our cybersecurity assessment report shows that 96% of IT leaders are concerned about threats posed by generative AI. So, but I think on positive side, right, of course, like defenders adopting artificial intelligence. So Bitdefender, we have been doing artificial machine learning, right, to detect malware since 2008, so more than 15 years. So I believe like building this innovation, this technology excellence is very important to move at the same speed as attackers, and even faster, right? Because it's like cat and mouse game, and we have to be proactive. And it should be also, I believe, a human-computer symbiosis, right? So I think like bringing human expertise. So definitely deploying unified, innovative tools is one thing, but deploying it correctly, right? And making it relevant and aligned with all other security controls and adopted by all people in the company, in the business, is where human expertise comes.
Yeah, definitely that's a challenge, especially at large organizations. And I've even seen it, especially at organizations where the users are technical as well, it becomes even more challenging sometimes. But one thing that's interesting that you mentioned was the human-computer symbiosis piece, because I also, of course, believe that as well, that like, it is a cat and mouse game, and, there's always a human at the other end, at least for now. So, you do have to be adaptive and change your sort of defense tactics, techniques, and procedures, just like the attackers are doing, right? And I agree with you 100% that that's a very important part of sort of an effective security strategy for any business. But kind of shifting topics, we're in Singapore. It's evening here, but yeah, very curious to hear some of your learnings about Asia specifically, given that you've been here for a while, and kind of like what we're seeing in the sort of market, both from the sort of the business's perspective, but also from the attacker perspective.
Sure. I think I mentioned already about cloud computing. Another area I would like to share is Internet of Things, or Internet of Everything, right? I think like Singapore is just like already has initial deployment of a new digital city, and like smart city, smart home as a big thing. And personally, it excites me a lot, this area like of IoT, IoE, because this is where digitalizations come to like our physical life, right? Like where it enables, like with smart technologies enables our more like smooth existence, right? Like social goods. But it also brings a lot of challenges, right? Because I also see like where cyber security issues can affect physical space, right? Can you imagine like a robot? It's a heavy thing, right? Like now roaming around like shopping malls, and if it compromises and bumps into you, it can cause a serious physical damage. And yeah, we have been having experience working with this industry, so I definitely see that there are vulnerabilities which have to be addressed, and unfortunately which can be compromised by cyber attackers. So I believe like also shifting left and developing IoT, IoE secure from the beginning, and also like applying a lot of security assessment, security testing is very important.
Yeah, and I think like, business email compromise is like kind of one of the things that we've seen a lot in Asia as well, that it's not the most technical attack, but still very effective in terms of generating income for the attackers. And have you seen that often, or anything unique you've seen in Asia from that front?
Yes, and I think a very interesting case, a few observations I had were basically victims in Asia. So it's a global company, more like with Asia headquarters, right, but having employees in the West. And they were receiving WhatsApp messages from their colleagues in the West, right? And WhatsApp message had a legit like Western number, and I guess like people here trust like what happens, what comes from the West. So they saw, okay, like this is a trusted message from the Western employee, but it was apparently phishing. So it was very well crafted phishing.
Oh yeah, WhatsApp is how we run in this region, so definitely can see that happening. Cool. And then from the sort of PT red teaming perspective, like I'd love to understand like what you've kind of seen there, both from the penetration testing and red teaming side of things, in terms of what businesses are sort of struggling with, and then yeah, like more of what you've seen.
Of course, like we still see a lot of basic things, right? Like broken access management, even like such simple things as hard-coded credentials. So it's still like a popular finding we can observe. On host configuration review side, right? We observe a lot of unsupported software, or even unnecessary software which is running on hosts, which is of course like having vulnerabilities and can be compromised very easily. And by the way, I think one important topic is to talk about vulnerabilities that we see in attacks happening nowadays, right? That vulnerabilities are compromised within 24 hours after exploit for this vulnerability is available. So basically attackers now target not just specific industry or specific company, they just opportunistically scan for all recent vulnerabilities which are not patched and compromise them. So yeah, to share my specific experience, right, what we've seen recently is that I've been talking about my favorite topic of IoT, IoE, right? So embedded device was running like a Python package. And like, why do you need a Python package in an embedded device? You're not doing coding with it, right? So it was left there, of course, like vulnerable, unmanaged, and easy to be compromised.
Interesting. Yeah, I think another thing with PT and red teaming that is kind of important and understood and sort of a good attack vector is access issues. Like how are you seeing that being handled, and is it being handled effectively in most organizations in the region, or you see kind of a mix of things?
Yeah, access management is very difficult. Like I think first of all is maintaining up-to-date users, right? Like maintaining up-to-date access is one thing, but second thing is managing right privileges, so not to give over privileged access. So like when, especially in a bigger company, when employees move around, change roles, right? Like often access is forgotten, is left, and they eventually pile a huge access privileges. And from my personal experience, right? Like when I was running like IT and security for a company of 200 people, we had like more than 100 of tools used, so like as many people as many tools as people will have. So definitely like maintaining all these tools up to date, like maintaining up to date access, and maintaining up to date users in these tools, obtaining up to date configuration is a big challenge. So all these misconfigurations, all these forgotten access, stolen credentials can be compromised.
Yeah, I mean, same thing from the cloud side of things. Like given both of our backgrounds on that front, I think the cloud access is always a trouble as well with so many different permutations of permissions. No one knows the right ones to give, and then like once you've given them, they basically never get taken away, right? So I think a lot of companies really struggle with that, and that's really important, especially when you're trying to reduce your attack surface in the cloud. But yeah, like on the PT and red teaming side, like how are you guys getting in? Like how are you guys like breaking into these companies that are asking us to help them in doing that?
It's still very basic, right? Like the most easiest and convenient way, because like same as attackers go for low-hanging fruits, we also go for low-hanging fruits. So basically we start with phishing, right? What we just talked about, like crafting a very customized phishing email, and then we get users tricked to download attachment from the email. Of course, here we have to consider mark of the web detection, because like if an attachment is downloaded from the internet is marked by the Windows, for example, or operating system is less trusted. So, but in this case, we can package them as an ISO file, and when a user clicks it, it mounts a file system, right? And then users can run an attachment, and it's less detected by security software. So actually, I'm not sure like why would a user mount ISO file easily, but yeah, it's happened quite often, and it's a very easy way to access.
Yeah, I can imagine phishing being the easiest way to get in for sure. But what else you guys are doing in there? Like what other ways are you sort of encapsulating, getting in the environment, and then exploiting? Are you using cloud? Are you using other types of software and infrastructure to get in?
Vulnerabilities, right? I think the same what we talked already about, that vulnerabilities are getting compromised within 24 hours after exploits are available. So same, we stay keep our hands on the pulse, right? Like we stay up to date. We observe all different recent exploits. We create our customized payloads, and we compromise through vulnerabilities.
Nice. Any stories from that front in terms of interesting ways you've gotten in?
I guess this is more private, right?
Yeah,
Keep it private.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and then I guess like once you're in, like what are you doing to kind of move laterally within the environments, and how are you breaking things and kind of showing the weakness of the organization's infrastructure?
Okay, yeah, I would refer to our very recent research, very interesting, of course, very scaring research about red curl threat actor.
Yeah.
So basically, this threat actor stayed undetected for a very long time because they used existing tools in the system, right? Like, of course, like PowerShell is used at every stage of attack, like same as like CMD commands. But yeah, this threat actor used all other different types of Windows tools to stay undetected, to simulate normal activities. And the same way we do, right? Like when we do lateral movement, like we can utilize like WinRS, right? For example, for remote management. We can utilize PowerShell, of course, to stay undetected during our lateral movement.
Nice. And any other interesting tools there? I know I've heard you mention bin as well, but like any other tools that you use or you've seen used in the from the attacker's perspective to sort of exploit environments?
Yes, of course we use ourselves like Bitadmin. So this tool we use both like at lateral movement stage as well as exfiltration stage. And the fun fact, again, like coming from our research from Bitdefender labs, that across all different companies we've been researching, observing across all different users, the tool, this tool is used only by 0.2%, right? So it's not used by 99.8%. So, and yeah, so it's definitely like a very good tool for attackers to be used, but it can be easily disabled because not many companies or not many users are using it. And this is a very handy tool because it's a facilitator for file transfers, so we can definitely like send files inside the environment as well as like we can use this tool to exfiltrate data.
Nice. Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on the sort of talk today. And Daniel, go ahead and pass it back to you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Nico. That was a powerful and frankly unsettling look into how modern attackers operate. What stood out to me wasn't just the tools used, but how effortlessly attackers blend into environments, using things we all rely on every day. No malware, no obvious signatures, just trust, misused. And that's what makes defending against these threats so incredibly difficult. It's not just about having alerts. It's about knowing what matters and what doesn't. It's about filtering the noise, finding the signal, and staying ahead of behaviors that don't look malicious until it's too late. Before we move on, just a reminder that you can leave your questions in the chat on either LinkedIn or YouTube, and we'll make sure to answer as many as possible. So let's flip the perspectives from red to blue. Let's talk about the day-to-day reality of defenders, the pressure, the complexity, and the growing need for smarter, more proactive defenses. To walk us through, I'm handing things over to our two top experts, Martin, our Technical Solutions Director, and Tyler Baker, our Director of Global Security Operations, reporting live from our Operations Center in San Antonio, Texas. They're going to walk you through the challenges defenders face every day and why it's time to take a smarter approach for detection and response. Martin, Tyler.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm Martin, and today I'm joined by Tyler. Tyler is Director of our Global Security Operations here at Bitdefender MDI. So we heard quite a lot of interesting things from the team in Singapore. You tell me, what does like the typical incident that you investigate here looking like? What does it like? How do they get inside? What do they do next, and so on?
Yeah. So we are a global security operations center with teams all over the globe. And we see a lot of the same type of attacks that are being successful. And a lot of it starts with unmanaged hosts. Unmanaged hosts are any host is our device that is not sending security telemetry to security experts, to security operations centers for them to investigate and triage. And these unmanaged hosts then will go undetected, uninvestigated, and attackers are able to persist on them, to elevate their privileges, to figure out how to laterally move and which host they should be laterally moving into. And then we see it. That's when we start to see them. Once they moved into an area that we're monitoring is when we'll respond and start to take. But then the attackers already had a lot of time to understand the environment, to understand the host, elevate the privileges, which causes a lot of issues for what we're looking at. We're also seeing vulnerabilities being exploited. VPN vulnerability.
Oh, edge network devices?
Network devices.
That's a big hit.
Those that are going unmitigated, unpatched, and allowing attackers to get into your environment quickly with sometimes with remote code execution, with admin level access, and they're able to do a lot without being stopped or prevented by security telemetry, the security capabilities that you have in place. And then, a lot of it we're also seeing is data access brokers. We're seeing that there are people that are compromising these environments and selling it on the dark web, allowing easy access into these environments. We're also seeing a lot of credentials being leaked onto the dark web for sale and for use. And so, unfortunately, what that means is it's increased our attack surface for the customers. It's increasing the attack surface for the environments that our security professionals are monitoring. And so,
stolen credentials, yeah, they don't break in, they log in.
Exactly.
That's how you do it today.
And so that causes a lot of one of the incidents that we see day in, day out. It's not the easy ones for us, or the ones that we're monitoring. We have the built-in knowledge base and understanding of that environment. But the longer attackers are able to, the easier attackers are able to go and look at unmanaged host vulnerability or some of the data accesses. It just gives them more and longer time to dwell within the environment.
So there was always the saying that it's not question if, it's question when. And for initial access, today it's definitely the case. They will get in, and there are so many ways, and it was never easier, I would say, than it is the last 2 years with vulnerabilities in edge network devices. It's a new playbook that all these groups are following. Now, question is this: once they move in and they start hitting into the managed devices, what is activity that you typically see? Which tools they are using? What is it that you are looking for that they are using?
So we have the very obvious ones, known malware, known bad IPs that attackers will use, and a lot of that gets prevented. A lot of that gets stopped, especially if you have EDR, XDR on those hosts. Most of that stuff gets prevented. And so what that does is forces an attacker to pivot. And what we're seeing now is how they're pivoting to living off the land attacks. They're looking at the environments that they have access to and seeing how they can use the tools and various third-party applications to further exploit it without having to add additional capabilities into it. And so we're seeing a lot of that happening. And what that means for us is, how do we detect that? How do we enable our analysts to be able to see it, understand it, and be able to respond to it quicker?
So let me ask you this, because one of the things in security, we are seeing everything there is, yeah? Quantify how frequently do you see living off the land attack tools?
So I would say it's almost 100% of the time where we're seeing it now. If it's not a matter of if they'll use it, it's a matter of when. If they're continuously being blocked by using traditional malware exploitation, they're going to shift to living off the land attacks. The longer you give them, the more opportunities you're giving them to pivot and figure out how they can further exploit the environment.
And I'm assuming they will not even try to test the malware. They will just go with the living off the land attack binaries.
Correct. Once they know it's up, they'll move on. And that comes back into, how do we detect that? How do we see that information or see these events happening? And one of the ways is, anomaly-based detections, understanding our users, how they're interacting with the systems that they're using day in, day out, what normal applications, what normal technology is on these hosts. And in the event that we have EDR, XDR deployed on these environments, we will see anomaly-based detections based off of that, which allows our analysts to get in front of these type of attacks, these living off the land attacks quicker, and respond to them. We're also looking at what third-party tools are on the environment, building a knowledge base, a baseline of certain remote management tools that are used, certain type of security tools that are also used within the environments for, penetration testing, for, network investigations, things like that, that is used by the company or the users themselves day in, day out. And so building that knowledge base, building those anomalies, building those detections allow us to detect on those early in the attacker lifecycle.
So if you say anomaly detections, the way how I think about it, there must be a lot of noise. I would expect expertise to actually look at the context, what's happening around. So how are you dealing with it? Or is there any?
No, I mean, I would say it's never a perfect science, but it's people, process, and technology coming together. First and foremost, people having the right experts in the room, looking at the data, looking at the detections that are coming in, and understanding where and how to use the processes that we have in place to respond appropriately. And we build and enable processes to make sure that our analysts not only are able to gather the critical context they need to make a decision, they know what actions they're allowed to take and can take, and then ultimately make sure that they're following the steps and follow through and are as effective as possible. And then lastly is technology. You know, how do we use the technology in our advantage? How do we use it to take response actions? How do we use it to gather more context? How do we use intel to enrich the data that we're looking at so analysts are able to make the right decision, especially with living off the land and tech risk? And there's a wide community of information and intelligence sharing going on, so we know how attackers are using living off the land techniques, how they will propagate through the attacker lifecycle. And so we make sure that our analysts have that same knowledge and expertise, so when they see that, they understand what's going on, they make their proper assessment and ultimately take the right response action to stop those types of threats.
But so question is, very often you cannot block these tools, yeah? Just impossible, because again, you have users that are using it, you have applications that use it, you don't even know about it. We looked recently at the telemetry and I was shocked that some tools that I would block immediately and I haven't seen them being used by administrators are actually used by tons of vendors when they need information about the underlying system. Like, that was big surprise for me. So if you cannot simply say seeing this process running somewhere is immediately like block it. So how do you look at the context? How do you define like this tool used? How does this work?
Yeah, because that's a great question. So it is a very reactive process, and that's the downside to it is we are relying on analysts to understand and look at what is normal to that user and to that host. So they'll need to go retroactively pull back similar activity and see if this user normally does that, normally uses those applications in the environment. When was it initially installed? When was the last time they used PowerShell? And that's a lot of investigation, a lot of manual work. And so it's very reactive, and we rely on our experts, our security analysts, to be able to do those type of things. But you know, that's the constant battle that our people in process and technology have of combating with living off the land techniques, because it's deliberate in trying to go unmitigated, using legitimate admin and IT tools that we see continuously used by admins and ITs to monitor, to access their other users remotely, to run PowerShell, to gather information about the host so they can do their role and their job. And so we see the same thing happening with attackers. And so it's a very hard thing to do proactively, because you might be stopping legitimate activity from going on. So you have to learn and understand and baseline your customers continuously. And it's very reactive in that case.
How dynamic is it in a way? Because I keep thinking like you have different customers with different departments, with different users. So do you do like your anomaly, is it based on the company or is it based on individual users, or how do you handle it? Because I believe like it's all about the balancing act, like how much noise and how much alerts can you process?
Yeah.
Like, that must be struggle.
Even, I think, you know, security operations centers that focus on just their environment understand that one environment is still very complex. And to be able to do proper asset management, to application management and risk management is a very hard thing to do, and do it successfully all the time. And from our side, when we're talking about an MDR service, we're dealing with thousands of customers bringing in all different types of environments, all different types of users. And it's very hard for us to always understand what is normal, what isn't. We have a general baseline, we have a general understanding of that based off of what we've seen in the past, which is why we're the experts. And then we use a lot of anomaly-based detections that are built into the EDR, XDR, and the cybersecurity technology that we employ in our customers' environments. But like it goes back into, you know, complex environments. It means that we have to continuously learn, update our knowledge about them. And, you know, it adds time to analysis, adds time to how we respond, and you know that is just giving an attacker more dwell time in the realistic view of it all.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the dwell time, that's like one of the most important things for you to keep it as short as possible.
Correct.
Yeah.
Dwell time is absolutely the number one thing. If you can reset a cred because they just the user just gave it up via a fake phishing, a phishing email. You've reduced the attacker dwell time down to nothing. If you notice reconnaissance commands going on in an environment while they're learning about the host and the environment they're in, and you're able to isolate the host, remove their access into it, you've just stopped the dwell time. You don't have to worry about what else will go on because they weren't able to get further into the environment. But the longer that they go undetected, which is what living off the land attacks is doing, and is what the purpose of them doing is, because it looks like legitimate activity. It looks like IT or admins could be doing this also. You're just increasing that dwell time for attackers.
Yeah. And the longer the dwell time, the more damaging the attack can be. Yeah. Like learning about the cybersecurity insurance, learning about the backup strategies, all the tools deployed and everything. So
yeah, and those are big things. That they will definitely learn about your environment and understand what technology you have in place to try to get around it.
Mm-hmm. So I heard that you have Little Helper, the new technology PHASR, and I'm wondering how is this going to change your life?
Yeah, so PHASR is going to be a great technology that we can use and that our customers will be employing in their environments. And what I see the benefits are, first and foremost, I see it forcing attackers to become noisy. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, when they try to execute living off the land techniques and a PowerShell is blocked because that is not normal for that environment or for that user, then they will pivot to other ways to try to exploit it. They may even try to remove the agent themselves. All of that, we have detections in place to be able to respond to that quicker. So we're forcing an attacker to pivot and to make other decisions about how they can exploit the environment. We're also looking at the fact that if we know that this user never used PowerShell and all of a sudden they are using it, or a certain remote management tool and it's being blocked, then we know that this is a higher fidelity alert. And we're going to treat it with the severity and the criticality it needs, declaring an incident and responding, understanding what access they have into the environment, were they able to exploit a vulnerability, did they get credential access in some way, and then respond appropriately to that.
I think it's also going to be the context of those tools that is going to help you out. So not just using PowerShell for the first time, but using PowerShell to download stuff.
Correct.
Yeah, so that is also really going to, we compare pretty much the detections that we are seeing against the known playbooks, and that is when we generate the alerts.
Yeah.
So for me, also one question that is really hard to answer, but I will ask it anyway. So we know all these threat actors have few established playbooks that they follow, mm-hmm. because it works, almost all the companies. Do you see that they will be able to pivot to something else? Or are they going to follow the playbook and suddenly realize this is not how it's supposed to be?
I agree. The benefit of the cybersecurity organization that we know how attackers are evolving, how they're changing. We know how they're using living off the land attacks to compromise these environments. And with PHASR and building those playbooks out, we know the steps that they've taken, and we're going to stop it as quickly and prevent it as quickly as we can. But that goes back into my original point of, this will create noise because attackers are going to be persistent. They're going to find other ways. So what we're focused on there is the higher fidelity alerting will reduce the dwell time, will allow us to respond quicker, will give us, knowing that they were able to further persist or laterally move in the environment because it was stopped, means that we can take action on getting the vulnerability patched, so we can reset the user credentials, we can isolate the host and stop them completely from further exploiting it. And so what we're really hoping and seeing out of PHASR is our ability to push the attacker, again, more left with that prevention capability, that automated prevention, the automated detection, the automated anomaly-based evaluations that is going on with PHASR have supplemented what the SOC analysts are doing day in, day out, and enabling them to be able to respond quicker and more effectively.
Yeah, I like to think about it that you are less reactive because you are not just looking at, hey, this happened and I'm investigating now and I'm going to look at the context and I'm going to confirm with the customer, is this normal or not? Instead, you are going to see on this box, that was attacker, this was blocked. And even though it happened in the past, you can first of all investigate immediately because it's a high fidelity alert. but also the attack did not progress. It got stuck at certain point, and that's when you start seeing like, oh, I need to download something, I need to find another way, because again, like this playbook suddenly is broken. Like I cannot follow the same playbook for all these attacks.
Yeah, 100%. And it's going to allow us to, once again, focus on the root cause, how they got in, what they were able to exploit to get to this point, knowing that we don't have to go much further in the investigation because it was stopped right then and there. And so those are wins for us. And it's like we mentioned, we've talked about over and over again, dwell time is the most critical aspect about a security investigation. The longer you give an attacker, the more ways they're going to kind of figure out how to evade your technology, evade being noticed, and or just encrypting or stealing information so they can get out of there with the information that you don't want them to have. So.
Okay, so I feel like we are all excited about the phaser, but what is it? How does it work exactly? So Daniel, thank you very much for letting us chat a little bit, but back over to you and tell us about what this technology actually is and how it works.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Tyler. If you're in a security team today, what they shared probably hit close to home. Threat detection is hard. Managing risk is even harder. But that's exactly why we've built what we are about to show you. This next part is really the heart of today's launch. We are going to take you deeper into the why, the how, and the what of phaser. This is more than a feature drop. It's a shift in philosophy, a new approach to hardening and reducing attack surfaces before the attacker even gets started. To guide us through it, I'm going to hand it over to Christian, our Director of Product Marketing, who's going to lead a conversation with me and with Dragos, our VP of Cyber Threat. We'll unpack what makes phaser unique, how it works under the hood, and what it means for your security strategy moving forward. Please allow me to introduce Dragos and Christy. Guys, come up here and we'll talk about phaser.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Dragos.
Nice to see you.
Hi,
Hello.
Christy.
Okay, so let's kick it off with the why. Dragos, can you tell us what made you and your team say we need to build this?
One word, tailored security. Now let me further explain what I mean by this. Often whenever a security solution is being built, we are thinking about how an attacker is developing its attack. What are the techniques, procedure, TTPs that he's actually using. But very rarely we actually think on particularities of the victim. Now, if we combine those two, we can actually build a stronger security. And this actually translates, and I kind of like to say a very specific word. What if there are not just a couple of security solutions out there? What if there are 8 billion security solutions out there? One, and the particular one for every one of us. Now, this was the actual vision that started the phaser project.
That's very interesting. And Daniel, from your side, what made you want to say we need to develop this into a product?
The reality that organizations are facing is today they do not have an easy way to reduce their attack surface. So we've been going through a lot of customer calls, prospect calls, industry analyst calls, and everybody's facing the same issue. How do I effectively and efficiently reduce my attack surface? Now, for us, that led us to think, hey, is there a better way for the product to actually help that security team? So that's basically the very, very short story of how we actually got to turn the amazing technology that Dragos and his team built into a product.
Thank you. I've seen also some very interesting statistics come out of labs. I've seen that approximately 70% of attacks now use legitimate tools. Can you both talk a little bit about this? Does this surprise you?
I'm easily surprised, easily shocked, but I'll let Dragos talk about all of these stats.
Yeah, so we're actually talking about living off the land techniques here, where pretty much implies that instead of actually adding a malicious payload to an attack, we're actually going to use a legitimate tool, but with malicious purposes. And yes, you are correct. Attackers seems to be using this more and more nowadays. And 𝐕∫ is actually really good about this because he can actually understand the patterns you are using for a specific tool that can be used by an attacker and actually block everything outside those patterns. So yes, this was one of the aspects that 𝐕∫ took into consideration when we started to build it.
Great. So building up on this, we've heard the blue team say earlier that 𝐕∫ makes attackers become noisy. Can you elaborate a little bit on this?
Yeah, I'm not, so noisy in this context should not be understood as necessarily false positive, but rather that an attacker, instead of actually using some of the tools that are found there because he doesn't actually know exactly what's going to be allowed or not. Keep in mind that the concept of 𝐕∫ is not that there is one rule for everybody, but there is a rule for each one of them. Then most likely an attacker will have to come up with their own tools, new malware, new packages, and because of this, it's going to be more noisy in terms of the attack. However, this is also going to make some things easier to detect. You're going to see some unknown packages there that shouldn't be, so it should be easier from a SOC team.
So, Christy, as I've been the host for a few moments on this event, let me ask you one question. When we first demoed this internally, what was your gut feeling as a marketing guy?
I would tell you that my gut feeling as a marketing guy and as a security specialist was that we're onto something special. So with 𝐕∫, not only we're solving a very important problem, and I could see it, but also this problem is at the moment just getting bigger and bigger, and there is no other security solution that can just reduce the attack surface without impacting employee productivity or without generating a lot of hassle for IT teams. So I was very excited, and I was very excited also about the number of use cases that we have for 𝐕∫. Okay, Daniel, let's make this real. When someone turns on 𝐕∫, what is actually happening in the background?
In the background, 𝐕∫ starts to learn from the second it's been turned on. It starts to learn what that user is doing on that device and how he or she is using those applications.
Dragos, over to you. How does 𝐕∫ learn what's normal on a certain system? I know it's not just about generic rules. How does it work?
No, so it's not just generic rules, but it's a lot about how you behave, but more importantly, how you behave in relationship with a specific asset. So let me further develop on this one. You have a specific behavior when you're using your laptop, but you might have a completely different behavior when you're using your phone or when you're using a server. So for example, you might use some application on your laptop, but you might use a completely different set of application on a specific server, especially if that server is something that you need to use for your job. Now what 𝐕∫ is trying to do is actually understand each one of these patterns. Now, the moment we are able to understand this pattern, and it takes a while to actually, visualize all of these potential patterns. Now, from that moment, we can actually identify everything outside of this normality sphere and start, either blocking, either producing an alert, and so on. But, in a nutshell, this is how it works.
Thank you, Dragos. And this is where I think the question continues for you, Daniel. We have all these options, blocking, producing alerts. This is up to the product team to decide what is the most important action or the best action to take to help security and IT teams. What are we doing with this?
So we've been discussing with a lot of customers as part of our early access program, and the thing that constantly came up in our discussions was, first of all, I want to understand my attack surface. So for this, we've built a dashboard that shows everything that is the attack surface exposure. Now, when it comes down to moving away from just visibility, like everybody in the industry is doing, just showing you the attack surface. 𝐲𝐵ZR has this capability of automatically generating recommendations. Now, these recommendations, they can be applied either directly to block some of those things, or you have direct control where you can actually decide on what things you want 𝐲𝐵ZR to block, what things you want 𝐲𝐵ZR to report.
Dragoș, 𝐲𝐵ZR does not just look at unused applications. It does much, much more than that. Can you tell us a little bit about this approach and why it's important?
Yeah, actually that's one of the core things about 𝐲𝐵ZR. So as you said, we don't necessarily look for, I don't know, you using a specific browser or you using a specific, let's say, messaging application. We're more likely to look at some application or some tools that an attacker is going to use if is able to get access to your system. Meaning that the idea of 𝐲𝐵ZR is not to look of all applications, but applications that are, for example, likely to be part of an attack kill chain. Because of this, we're working closely to, for example, what MITRE Matrix produces, and we're trying to map some of those actions directly into 𝐲𝐵ZR. Now, to simplify this, if it's an action that is potentially risky, let's take one example. For example, let's say we're talking about exfiltration. Now, usually exfiltration in many cases has like an initial step where you gather the data and you archive them into an archive or something like this. Now, if it's something that you're doing on a, let's say, regular basis, like collecting the data, archiving them, and so on, then even if this as an action is described in MITRE Matrix, it's not something that we can necessarily alert. But if it's something that you haven't done for a large period of time and suddenly you're doing this, then maybe this is something we need to pay more attention on. And this is the type of actions where 𝐲𝐵ZR looks closely, not, I don't know, running a browser or something like this.
And by disabling these actions, we're basically reducing the attack surface without impacting the user. So we know we are disabling some potential activity that could be leveraged by attackers.
Yes.
Perfect. And Daniel, now over to you. Let's talk a little bit about automation and about workflows with 𝐲𝐵ZR. I know there are two profiles usually in the industry. There are people who want a button and they want everything to be automated once they press the button. There are others who want to be able to manage everything. Can you tell us how we're approaching this?
So with 𝐲𝐵ZR, we try to cater to both of them. So we have 𝐲𝐵ZR in autopilot, which basically automatically applies the recommendations that were issued. And we have 𝐲𝐵ZR in direct control, which provides that granularity that you are talking about. So some of our customers would like, for some of the categories where 𝐲𝐵ZR applies, the recommendations they want to have granular control. For other categories and other types of customers want to have all of this in an automated fashion. Now, the biggest part here is the fact that 𝐲𝐵ZR will not apply a recommendation unless it understands that that recommendation is suitable for that particular profile. So the fact that it continuously learns and understands what is happening with that particular user on that particular device gives 𝐲𝐵ZR the edge.
Perfect. Dragoș, we talked about attackers leveraging legitimate tools, but one thing they also like to do is reuse the same playbook across different systems, across different victims. Can you talk a little bit about this attacker strategy and how 𝐲𝐵ZR can stop it?
Certainly. So first let's start and actually describe how an attacker is designing its attack. So the first step it has to do is to actually identify an entry point. The second step is to try to find the security solution that is being used on that organization. It's not really relevant at that point how those two things are going to be found by an attacker. But once it has something like this, the third thing that it can do is create a simulation within its own lab. So, buy some laptops, install that security product, buy it somewhere, and then you can try your attack over and over again until it succeeds. Now, one thing that has to be clear here, there is no, let's say, business value for any attacker to launch an attack that he knows that it's going to be detected. So he has to try over and over again up to a point where it has something that that security solution, at least within its simulation, it's not going to be detected, right? Okay. Now, the fact is that the attacker actually relies on the determinist of the situation, meaning that if a security solution detects certain type of attacks here, the same update, the same security solution is going to detect the same thing in the real world. And vice versa, the thing that it's not going to detect within its lab, it's not going to detect on the real world. That's the determinism of the situation. So once I have a scenario that actually goes in my simulation, it's very likely that's going to work identically on the real world. Now, this is what an attacker does. Now, what's changing when we add PHASR into the equation? Well, as I said, remember my initial phrase, there isn't one security solution. Think about like 8 billion security solutions. So you cannot duplicate exactly what's on that entry point. All you have is an assumption, the security product, but you don't know exactly what we expect here. So I'm not going to say that all of the attacks are going to be blocked. I'm just going to say that it's very likely that the attack could be blocked because the attacker doesn't actually know what kind of security solution is there, what kind of protection is there, and so on.
So basically, it will behave like a different solution on each endpoint. And it doesn't really matter because attackers have time on their side to perfect one attack. But if they manage to do it on one endpoint, it will not work on the next one.
Exactly.
Correct. Now, switching over to PHASR and the real uses for PHASR, I wanted to ask you, Daniel, and I'm excited about this because I know some of the answers, but tell me a little bit about the feedback that we received from the early access.
One of the feedbacks that remained in my mind was like, we went into a call with one of our early access customers and he was asking, why didn't we have this like 5 years ago? The reality is that while the solution seems quite simple, building that technology behind it requires a lot of investment and a lot of research and development. And that is where Dragos and his team actually came in, delivering a unique capability.
I also heard some feedback around the fact that people were uncovering things that they didn't expect.
Yeah, that is 100% true. So we've went into several calls with different customers who all had like the classic application control running in their environment, and they were like, wait, PHASR discovered something that my classic application control completely missed? How is this possible? Well, again, this is the purpose for PHASR. It's to show you the real attack surface, how to reduce it, and how to proactively harden your endpoints.
Exactly, and I think one thing that stands out for me was the fact that people actually achieved this impressive reduction in attack surface. And we have one case study and one video testimonial that are coming up to talk exactly about this. But is there something you would like to add?
I think that for a lot of our customers who were part of the early access program, reducing that attack surface actually started to be like an internal game, right, between the members of the security team. One of the key things that they wanted to do is they wanted to see who's more efficient at reducing the attack surface compared to the rest of the team members. And one thing led to the other, and they are happily almost close down to, well, as close as possible to zero.
That's great, and I know customers are or were looking forward to today to just start using PHASR and start leveraging it. Thank you, Daniel. Dragos, I know attack surface reduction rules are not easy to manage. Can you talk a little bit about the dynamic part of PHASR?
Okay, so obviously understanding a specific pattern, a specific behavior, it's a complex job. And it's not something static. It's something that's going to change. Now, what 𝐲𝐻ZR does is that it tries to adapt with the change. So what's the simplest way of saying this? So if I see that you're starting to use some tools because as a legitimate user that I'm not going to start, alert them or alert upon them. However, that's the most simplistic thing. Another very important component is something that we've previously mentioned, is that we don't look to everything. We look to some scenarios where it's more likely that it reflects some malicious behavior rather than something particularly normal. But the keyword here is self-adaptation. So 𝐲𝐻ZR adjusts with the way you're actually behaving. In certain scenarios, that adjustment doesn't have to be too large. You just have some people that do the same thing over and over again, so it's a more constant thing. In other, adjustments have to be done maybe on a daily basis because this is the type of job that person has, and 𝐲𝐻ZR will adjust to it.
And I know that this is where people see a lot of value with 𝐲𝐻ZR because they don't need to manually worry about attack surface reduction rules and about exceptions that they need to maintain, they sometimes forget about, and that's where your risk comes in. So that's something that we've heard good feedback so far. Daniel, let's talk a little bit about pricing and how customers can, starting from today, buy or purchase 𝐲𝐻ZR.
So first of all, I'll break down this question into actually two answers. One, it's the same agent. So it's a module on the agent. Whoever has GravityZone Bitdefender endpoint security tools deployed, they just need to enable 𝐲𝐻ZR through the policy, and that's it. 𝐲𝐻ZR will start learning, it will start working. When it comes down to pricing, 𝐲𝐻ZR comes as an add-on on top of our various bundles around business security, enterprise, and GravityZone XDR. But let me reverse that question. Is this available for MSPs and MSSPs?
Yes, it's available for MSPs, for MSSPs, and we've actually seen quite a lot of interest from MSPs. We've just had the partner webinar recently, and we've got a lot of questions from MSPs, so they would be excited to learn more. Dragoș, what's next for 𝐲𝐻ZR from the lab's perspective? What are you looking to enhance and to develop about it?
So there are two things that we need to take into consideration. First is, obviously, right now we're looking into some specific patterns, and they are related to endpoint. But the next things will be to go beyond the endpoint. Every type of services, everything that relates to how users behave in relationship with servers, with other cloud components should also be part of the 𝐲𝐻ZR component. So that's one thing. The second one is do a lot of data mining. So once we're going to enable this to more customers, we're actually going to be able to understand more about different type of attack behaviors. So this will actually help us to further improve other components within 𝐲𝐻ZR, including the way it adjusted to some scenarios, to being more smooth to some sudden changes and so on.
That is already very exciting. And switching over to you, Daniel, what is the overall Bitdefender GravityZone product vision, and how does 𝐲𝐻ZR fit into this vision?
So the vision for GravityZone is to provide a security solution that gives proactive hardening, attack surface reduction, and allows companies to achieve compliance effortlessly. Now, 𝐲𝐻ZR fits very well in this vision. Why? Because it is here to deliver that proactive component, to make sure that your environment is secure. And not only on the endpoint level, but at the organization level.
That sounds exciting. And Daniel, final word. What do you want security leaders to take away from the 𝐲𝐻ZR launch?
This one is very simple. What I want security leaders to understand from this launch is the fact that proactive security exists, is real, and is available starting today. Thank you very much both. This has been a blast. 𝐉𝐨R is one of those rare things that actually simplifies security without watering it down. And it's just getting started. Next up, we're going to show you a short demo. Then we'll show you exactly how 𝐉𝐨R works, what it looks like in action, and then take your questions live. Let's jump in. So we have been talking a lot about 𝐉𝐶R, but let's actually see it in action. So, 1 second to just discuss about how 𝐉𝐶R works, to give you a bit more clarity and a bit more detail. 𝐉𝐶R, for each of the users that have 𝐉𝐶R enabled, starts to analyze the attack surface. Once this analysis is complete, it starts to create what we call a reverse anomaly. Now, with this reverse anomaly, 𝐉𝐶R is able to issue policy recommendations. These policy recommendations can be applied either automatically or can be applied directly by the administrator. The best part about 𝐉𝐶R is the fact that it is able to continuously learn and to continuously adapt and issue new actionable recommendations. In reality, each of the users is different. Each of the users has a different attack surface. Classical security solutions are looking at the common attack surfaces. With 𝐉𝐶R, the main difference is that 𝐉𝐶R uses a different mapping for each user, a map that is changed dynamically and that is the best fit for that user, not for everybody. This is how the technology works. Now, let's take a quick look on how it actually works within GravityZone. First of all, 𝐉𝐶R is policy controlled. Why? To give you the granularity to set it up either for your entire endpoint estate or for your critical infrastructure or for various bits and pieces within your organization. Once 𝐉𝐶R is enabled through the policy, it starts to learn. The learning is done instantly for existing EDR customers. For customers that are new to Bitdefender GravityZone, it takes a couple of days to start for this learning process to happen. Once the learning has started, 𝐉𝐶R begins to map the attack surface exposure. It shows this in a dashboard, in a view that is giving you the clear visibility into your attack surface. 𝐉𝐶R also starts issuing actionable recommendation. By default, it goes around those 5 categories. Leaving off the land binaries, tampering tools, crypto miners, hacking tools, remote administration tools. All of these recommendations, they can be applied either automatically by putting 𝐉𝐶R in autopilot or by gaining direct control. Administrators have the granularity needed to apply these recommendations based on their needs. Of course, like any other tool, with 𝐉𝐶R, you get a full audit trail for each of those profiles. Now, the beauty of 𝐉𝐶R is that it continuously adapts to your users. It reduces exposure and enforces control. If we were to look at a real-world example, and I would say this is a very common thing that we are seeing in the industry, a ransomware affiliate gains access with stolen credentials, then targets 2 or more users. For this example, to keep it simple, we'll just take 2 users, user 1 and user 2. Now, the only things that we know about user 1 is that user 1 commonly uses PowerShell. User 2 never uses PowerShell. They have the same security policy applied. Now, any classic security solution would say, okay, PowerShell can run on both machines. Why? Because they have the same security policy. 𝐲𝐴ZR is able to understand the fact that user 1 is using PowerShell. Not only that, but how user 1 is actually using PowerShell. Which commands is he running? The behavior of PowerShell when that particular user is utilizing it. Now, with user 2, 𝐲𝐴ZR understands that user 2 has never, ever opened PowerShell. But at the same time, it can still run on his machine. 𝐲𝐴ZR issues a recommendation saying, because user 2 never ran PowerShell, he doesn't need to run it. So just block it. For user number 1, 𝐲𝐴ZR says, okay, I know how user number 1 runs PowerShell. I'll allow it only in that way. If we were to look at how this actually translates in the protection side. Let's take user number 1. Again, user number 1 is a user that always uses PowerShell. Let's just log in on that particular machine and run a simple PowerShell command. You can see 𝐲𝐴ZR is enabled. Everything is running here on this machine. Because user number 1 is normally running PowerShell, 𝐲𝐴ZR understood this behavior, understands the set of commands that he is running, and allows it. But let's say I want to run a different type of command, which is outside of my normal behavior, a command that is in 99 or 100% of the cases something malicious. Now, 𝐲𝐴ZR will say, okay, you've never done this before, you are not allowed to run it. Why? Because, again, this is a malicious intention for this particular command. The same goes for WMIC, for example. User number 1 never ran WMIC, so he's not allowed to run it. This means that for the attacker that has tried to impersonate user number 1, he could only run the commands that user number 1 usually runs. Now, let's look at user number 2. Again, keep in mind, they have the exact same security policy in the classic, traditional security product kind of way. But with 𝐲𝐴ZR knows that user number 2 has never run PowerShell. So why does he need PowerShell to be active on that particular machine? We'll connect to the second VM, and now me as the attacker, I am trying to run PowerShell on this particular machine. 𝐲𝐴ZR knows that and understands that the normal behavior for user number 2 is not to run PowerShell. This means that if I am an attacker and I compromised user number 2 and I want to run a PowerShell command, I will be denied by default. Let's take a quick look and see what happens directly on this machine. So we connect to the second virtual machine, 𝐲𝐴ZR is active, and we try to run PowerShell. Again, 𝐲𝐴ZR issued that actionable recommendation saying user number 2 has never run PowerShell, denied by default. Now, there is another aspect here, one that is more important. Each of these users is unique, but they have the same security policy applied. With 𝐲𝐴ZR, each of these users gets their tailored protection. Why? Because 𝐲𝐴ZR is able to understand the attack surface and is able to proactively harden those profiles. The reality is that your employees are unique, and their protection should be too. I know that is a lot to take in, but that is the reality. Think of it like this. You have the ability to have a solution that is tailored, that is able to reduce your attack surface in a smart way. A solution that is precise, that is able to enforce smart access, not just blanket rules. And a solution that is dynamic, because it continuously changes how your attack surface is protected based on the behavior of those users across those devices taking into consideration the applications that they are running. At the beginning, I showed that matrix of how an attack surface looks like. If you look here, you'll see for an attacker, the best thing that they can do is have something that is static, that never changes. They'll figure out the way to move from one dot to the other, etc. The reality is that PHASR doesn't give them this chance. It dynamically changes the protection based on the user's behavior, based on that profile that we are building. Because every user is unique. Every user has their own unique protection. Now, I know this was quite a short demo. If you want to learn more, of course, feel free to reach out directly to our teams over at bitdefender.com/PHASR. But at the same time, next week, we are going to be at RSA. So please drop by our booth there. Thank you for the demo part. I know that now it's actually time for us to move on to Q&A. Why? Because I've seen that you guys were super busy during all of the interventions that we had. I actually got a chance to answer a couple of questions there. But next, we will move on to Q&A. Thank you very much. All right, what you just saw is the future of proactive hardening. Real-time risk reduction, tailored to your employees. Now, I've seen that you were quite busy during the event and even got a few chances to answer some of your questions over social media. But I feel that we can answer a few more, so let's get to it. Okay, let me check the first one. How is PHASR different from traditional hardening tools? Okay, that is a great question. Traditional hardening tools usually take a static approach. They apply the same set of rules to every endpoint, regardless of context. You might be compliant, but you're not necessarily secure. PHASR is different because it adapts. It builds a behavioral baseline for every endpoint, for every user. It understands how it operates. And then it dynamically applies hardening policies that fit that machine, that user, that moment. It's not just compliance focused. It's risk aware, continuous, and always evolving. Let's check another one. If we already have EDR or MDR, why do we need PHASR? Now, that's another great question, and one we hear often. The short answer is EDR and MDR detect. PHASR prevents. PHASR doesn't compete with EDR. It makes it better. It reduces the attack surface in real time. So there's less for your EDR to detect in the first place. That means fewer alerts, less noise, and more focus for your detection team or even your MDR provider. It's about shifting security left, removing risk earlier, not just reacting faster. Let's take another one. How long does it take for PHASR to become effective once deployed? Now, PHASR starts learning from day one. If you are an existing GravityZone EDR customer, the learning is done instantly. So you will start seeing results in a very short amount of time. For a new deployment, PHASR learns and starts to build initial baseline and begins generating low-impact hardening recommendations. Throughout our early access program, participants have started seeing significant reductions in risk exposure in the first 30 days. And because it learns continuously, it gets better and better over time, adapting as your environment evolves, with no manual tuning required. Let's take another one. Does 𝐲𝐴ZR require a new agent to be deployed? Not at all. 𝐲𝐴ZR integrates seamlessly into your existing GravityZone deployment. No new agents, no additional infrastructure, and nothing extra to install. We designed it to be modular and easy to activate. So whether you're using GravityZone standalone or with our MDR service, 𝐲𝐴ZR can be turned on instantly across your entire environment. The most important part, zero disruption. Let's look for another question. What does pricing look like? And is it flexible for service providers? Interesting question. I know most likely who's sending this one. So we've built 𝐲𝐴ZR pricing to be straightforward and scalable. It's available both monthly and annually. So it works for both enterprises and service providers. And yes, it is fully compatible with our MSP and MSSP programs. You can onboard customers flexibly, you only pay for what you use, and extend the full value of 𝐲𝐴ZR as part of your managed service offering. Some fantastic questions. Thank you to everyone who jumped in. We'll continue to address these questions after the event. And now, to bring it all together, I'm turning it over to our General Manager, Andrei Florescu, for the final word. Andrei, the virtual stage is yours.
Thank you, Daniel. Whoa, we covered a lot today. From the harsh reality of modern threats to the tools attackers are using right now in live environments. We've seen just how complex it is to detect and stop these threats using traditional approaches. And we've shared how our approach, the introduction of 𝐲𝐴ZR, marks a fundamental shift in how we think about cybersecurity. I want to take a few minutes to step back and reflect on what this all means. Cybersecurity is undergoing a transformation. It's not enough to detect threats once the threat is inside your environment. We have to make it harder for attackers to even begin their journey. That's where 𝐲𝐴ZR comes in. It doesn't wait for prior knowledge of what's bad to trigger alerts. It starts understanding your environment, your users, your systems, your software, and proactively reduces the potential pathways attackers can exploit. This is the future, one where defense isn't just reactive. It's intelligent, adaptive, and predictive. But more importantly, 𝐲𝐴ZR is part of a broader philosophy that we're deeply committed to. It's the belief that great security doesn't come from just piling on more tools. It comes from aligning your technology to the reality of how attacks are happening and how businesses operate. Businesses today are moving faster than ever. Cloud first, hybrid workforces, distributed infrastructures. Security cannot slow them down. It has to enable them. We built 𝐲𝐴ZR for that reality, for organizations that need to stay ahead without sacrificing speed, agility, or user experience. This journey didn't happen overnight. It took years of research and development. It took input from customers on 3 continents. It took hundreds of engineers, analysts, and researchers, all working towards one goal, to give defenders an edge. To our teams in Europe, US, Asia, thank you. Your talent, your vision, and your resilience made this launch possible. To our early customers and design partners, you pushed us to think differently, continuously challenging us. Your feedback was essential in shaping 𝐲𝐴ZR into practical, impactful solution that it is today. And to everyone watching, you are the reason we do this. Your trust, your challenges, your mission to protect what matters most is what drives our innovation. So what comes next? Today marks the beginning of general availability of 𝐲𝐴ZR. 𝐲𝐴ZR is going live. It's real and it's ready to be deployed in your environments. Whether you're an enterprise, an MSSP, or a public sector leader, 𝐲𝐴ZR is here to help you reduce risk and outpace your adversaries. Our teams are ready to support you, answer your questions, and help you map your journey to proactive security. Thank you again for spending your time with us today, and thank you for your interest, your support, and your belief in a better way forward. Stay secure. We'll see you soon.